Welcome to Newman Night. Our speaker tonight is a friend of mine, someone that got to know many years ago and continue to now be a brother priest to. He was ordained 10 years ago, and at that time he was assigned as part-time chaplain at St. Mary's Catholic High School. Little did he know that today he would now be the president of that same high school. Although he went to the rival, no, okay, we won't mention that. But it's great. He knows a lot about education. This is a total side note, but for anybody who's an education major who wants to do secondary ed, introduce yourself to him because he's always looking for good teachers. But tonight, we're going to hear about a topic that we typically hear about in the church towards the end of what's called the liturgical year. So as the days are getting darker and it's colder, at the end of the liturgical year, we think about the end things. And so it was fitting to have a topic about heaven and hell. What do we know? What do we not know? And so I called Father Bolding, and he agreed to come and speak about this topic to help us understand a little more. So please help me welcome Father Bolding.
Good evening, everyone. Was anybody here when I came and spoke last year at the Newman Night? Okay, so most of you I have never met before, so just tell you a couple things. First of all, as Father Matt said, he and I go way back. Believe it or not, when I was in high school, Father Matt was my youth minister, so he was much older than he was. And when I first walked into youth group, it was very much like what he's doing here. He's very friendly, greeting at the door. The other thing is, before I went to seminary, I was a lumberjack for 1 year, so it always feels a little bit like a homecoming. And yes, I should have thought of it. I come every year once a year, and I should think about recruiting teachers, but I never do. So if you think you'll be a good teacher, and you should Catholic school, please come talk to me. So Father Matt is a very organized person, and I'm a very disorganized person. So Father Matt, starts calling me a year in advance. And, hey, you gonna come for Newman Night? Yeah. I need you to give me a topic so that I can start advertising it, and I always put them off. So a couple weeks ago, Father Matt called me and said, "But we'll do a topic yet?" I said, "What the hell, Father?" He said, "Sounds great." But yeah, so I want to talk about heaven and hell tonight. I came up with a title for my talk when I was driving up here today, and it's Reimagining Heaven and Hell. And as Father Matt said, it is a very important, it's a very appropriate time to be thinking about the last things, because the church's life is very cyclical. There's, if you look at, for instance, how the church prays, every day it's kind of like a repeating of the cycle of life. So we begin the day by giving praise to God. We end by giving praise to God, but also before we go to bed every night, priests and religious, we actually do an examination of conscience, and we pray for a good death, right? The last words we say before we go to sleep are, grant us a restful night and a peaceful death. And not only does the day reflect the cycle of sort of life, but so does the church week. Right? Every Friday, for instance, is a little commemoration of the Lord's Passion, which is why we do fasting and penances on a Friday. Every Sunday is a celebration of the resurrection. And then throughout the year, the church's liturgical life kind of follows that cycle, so that we're always meditating on the different aspects of human existence. And for the church, the new year is not on January 1st. The new year is on the first Sunday of Advent, which is this Sunday, which makes this week kind of our reflection on the end of time. And if you come to daily Mass very often, or even if you just come to Sunday Mass, you'll notice in November, the readings get very kind of scary and doom and gloomy. We start getting revelations and end time predictions and all that. And that's because of this reason, because the church is inviting us every year to focus as we come to the end of the year on thinking about the last things. So the title I wanted to give to this talk is Reimagining Heaven and Hell. And And the reason is this. I think that we all need to spend more time thinking about heaven. The reason I think we need to spend more time thinking about heaven is the Christian life is long and difficult. Anybody who tells you otherwise is deceiving you. Right? If we are going to persevere in the Christian life, then we need to have a desire for something good, a desire for something beautiful. Really, we need to awaken in ourselves a desire for heaven. I've always been a firm believer as a priest, as a minister, as a teacher, a preacher, that hellfire and brimstone is not a very effective way of evangelizing. The reason is, if somebody makes us scared of hell, then we might try to get our act straight for like a couple weeks or a couple months, but it's always going to fall apart, right? If we are really going to persevere and live in the Christian life, we have to fall in love. But there has to be something that we desire. And so I think that we don't think about heaven often enough. And when we do, I think we don't really always know what to think about heaven. Conversely, I think we don't know what to think about hell. So here's what, if many of us ever stop to think about the afterlife, we might conjure up an image something like this. So, if I'm good, God will reward me with this place that is called heaven, but nobody's ever really been to. And even the Bible doesn't actually tell us that much about what heaven is like. But maybe I can imagine, maybe it's being on clouds and bright lights and harps and angels singing, or maybe it's a place where I imagine I'm getting everything I ever wanted, or just a place where there's no sadness, or just have a lot of fun. Contrarily, if I'm bad, then God is going to punish me by sending me to hell, and I'll burn, and everything smells like sulfur. And for eternity, which is an unimaginable reality, I'll have like devils poking me with pitchforks while I'm, drowning in acid or something. So, there's a wonderful book. It's an easy read. It's a fast read. I highly recommend it to you. It's called The Great Divorce. Have anybody read it? Does anybody know who C.S. Lewis is? Yeah, so C.S. Lewis is, he was not Catholic, he was almost Catholic, he was a high church Anglican. He was a Christian apologist and a linguist and also a novel writer. So he is most famous for writing the Chronicles of Narnia, but he also wrote a lot of Christian apologetic books. And he wrote a novel called The Great Divorce. And The Great Divorce is a wonderful, imaginative way of looking at what heaven and hell is. And in the introduction to that book, he kind of talks about his main thesis. And if you haven't heard this quoted before, I guarantee you, if you stay around Christian intellectual circles long enough, you'll hear somebody quote C.S. Lewis as saying that the doors to hell are locked from the inside. And what he means by that is that the people who are in hell choose to be there. Now, I'm kind of tempted to actually give a whole side talk on that idea, but I'm going to let that go. But he presents in his introduction, and then kind of imaginatively throughout the novel, he presents this idea that in the end, heaven and hell are both retrospective. In the end, heaven and hell are both retrospective. And what that means is that for those who choose God, and who attain to heaven, when they look back on their lives, they'll realize that all along their life was a participation in heaven. And that even the sorrows that they went through were part of their coming home to Jesus. And for those who choose themselves, because at the end of the day, either you will say to God, your will be done, or God will say to you, your will be done. For those who choose hell, which is to choose selfishness, he says if they look back on their lives, they'll see that their whole life was a participation in hell. And even the things that they enjoyed or the seeming pleasure that they had in life were already beginning on the path to hell. So I'm really fascinated by that idea. And one of the things that so fascinates me about it is because if C.S. Lewis is correct and heaven and hell are both retrospective, then that means that my life right now is deeply connected with my eternity. And please hear this part, not just in the sense of my actions being rewarded or punished. The way that I live right now, what I want, what I choose, how I act, is connected in a deep way to my eternity. And not just in a way that, that I'm hoping to receive a reward that has nothing to do with my actions, or to receive, I don't want to receive a punishment that has nothing to do with my actions. So, all this goes to say, if it's a little bit maybe childish to imagine heaven as like the place in the clouds where you play volleyball with Jesus, and hell is the place where you're getting stabbed with pitchforks. By the way, maybe tonight if you think about it, YouTube search The Simpsons Protestant versus Catholic hell. If you've never seen it. So it's the Protestant versus Catholic hell. Or, I'm sorry, heaven. Protestant versus Catholic heaven. So yeah, if it's necessary for us to think about heaven because that's our true home, that's our true destiny, and because we want heaven to become retrospective and start to be present already in our lives, then we need to think about it. We need to maybe come to a deeper understanding of what heaven is, which also means coming to a deeper understanding of what hell is. So even though I've talked about C.S. Lewis so far, I'm actually going to base most of what I have to say tonight on the thought of Cardinal Ratzinger, better known as Pope Benedict. Although most of what I'm quoting was written before he was a pope. So let's start with hell, so that we can end with the good news. So what I want you to do is, let's take 15 seconds in silence, and I want you to think about what your deepest fear is. And when I say deepest fear, I don't mean like phobias, right? So I'm not asking like spiders or clowns or something like that, right? What is your deepest, most existential fear? Would anybody like to share their deepest fear by any chance? Is that appropriate small talk? Yeah.
Being alone and being unlovable.
Being alone and being unlovable. Wow. Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
Living without a purpose.
Okay, so a purposeless life, being alone, being not just unlovable, but unlovable. Yeah, those are. Yeah, maybe one more. So I'm glad that you actually said that, because I think that if many of us examine our anxieties about life, what we'll find is that the roots of our deepest fears have to do with isolation, have to do with loneliness, have to do with abandonment. If you've never read Cardinal Ratzinger / Pope Benedict, first of all, it's pretty heavy stuff. Right, so I recommend it, but it's you got to do some work, and maybe have somebody with a theology degree to talk to. One thing that he's really, really good at is he's really good at honestly looking at the human experience and asking very straight questions. Right? He's not afraid to look at humanity's deepest struggles right in the face, and as a result, he has insights into life that are so beautiful to me. So, in this book that he wrote in 1968 called Introduction to Christianity, he talks about this fear that belongs only to mankind. And he points out, I think this is very true, he says, of all the creatures in the world, only man has fear for no reason. The priest I live with, Father Steve, we both have dogs. And one night we were sitting outside smoking a pipe, and he says to me, Father Steve thinks random stuff, and he says, you know what's interesting about dogs is every time dogs bark or growl, there's something out there. What do you mean? He said, well, they don't just randomly get scared. Like the way, if you're in a weird house alone at night, you might get a little bit creeped out, even though nothing's actually provoking your fears. That doesn't happen to me once, right? If a dog is growling, you can bet that there's something out there that is growling at. It says, but humanity, we actually suffer from this strange dread that can overtake us sometimes, and it's not fear of anything in particular, it's just plain fear. And he points out a couple of instances that are very thought-provoking. He says, for instance, if you are left alone in a room for some reason with a dead body, you can be very uncomfortable. But why? He points out, this made me laugh, he says that if you think about it rationally, that person would be more dangerous to you if they were still alive, right? Unless the dead body died of some sort of contagious disease, it poses no threat to you. But there is something about the presence of that body that is sort of deeply terrifying when you're left alone with it. Or it's just a child, for instance, walking in the woods at night. Even if it's the woods of his own backyard, even if it's a very safe wood, and he's very familiar with. If he's walking alone in the dark, sometimes this terror will overtake him. But he says, what is necessary to dispel that fear? Because all that has to happen is the hand of someone who loves him to reach out and take hold of him, and that fear goes away. That is such a true insight. That if you're left alone with that body, you might be terrified until somebody comes and you're no longer alone. And then that sort of anxiety just goes away. I've noticed that about like haunted houses. Well, first of all, I've noticed that ghosts exclusively operate at night. But then the second thing is, we're just not as scared when we're with somebody. Even though it makes no sense, right? If you have a friend come, hey, let's sleep in the same room, this house is creepy. That friend can't help you against ghosts or demons or whatever it is that you're afraid of. But you just feel better when somebody's there. And the conclusion that Ratzinger draws from this is that our deepest fears are actually rooted in this sense of isolation. The sense that I'm alone in the universe. He says one of the things that makes death so terrifying for us is that death is kind of that final lonely door that we walk through alone and then nobody comes back from. Because the terror of death is that it's actually this leaving behind of community and entering into isolation. Now, why would this be such a terrifying thing for us? Well, it makes sense, actually, if you think about the fact that God is love and we're made in God's image and likeness. Which means we are made for love. We're made for communion. You really have to think about you can spend the rest of your life meditating on the fact that God is 3 in 1, and you'll never exhaust the mystery. But one of the conclusions that we can draw from that is that at the very center of existence, God himself is a communion of persons. Because there is no absolute solitude in God. There's no absolute solitude in the heart of existence. God is communion, and he makes us in his image and likeness, and he makes us in communion. Right? He creates man and says, oh, it's very good. And what's one of the first things he says about man? It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone, because he's made for love. Right? Why do we have free will? Right? We misunderstand our freedom all the time. Freedom is not so that we can do whatever we want. Freedom is because if you don't have freedom, you can't love. If you don't have freedom, you can't be in relationship. Right? If you make your stuffed animals like move and walk, you're not going to be very satisfied by that friendship, right? Because they're not actually responding to your freedom. Similarly, God wanted to create other persons that he could be in relationship with. In order to be in relationship, we have to have freedom. So even that gift of freedom, which is essential to making us the human beings that we are, is ordered towards relationship and communion. So we are made for love, we're made for communion. It's not good for us to be alone, and so no wonder our deepest fears are rooted in the sense that we're going to be cut off from communion. Now, Ratzinger will say that, so death is this kind of scary place because it's this place of isolation. And he says even if you form yourself in the Jewish imagination, they even kind of understood death and sickness, by the way, sickness that would make you be separate from the community. They considered participation in death. What made death so bad is that you are no longer part of the people. But when Jesus became man, and when he died on the cross for us, he entered into death. But Jesus never stops being life. Right? Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So even when Jesus enters into death, we could just say life enters into death. So that place, Sheol, the place of the dead, life itself enters into that. This is a great source of hope for us. And then not only that, but he rises again from the dead, thus conquering death, right? Throwing open the door so death no longer has the final word. He says this actually gives us great hope. And a part of the reason for our great hope, maybe the ground for our hope, is the fact that even death is no longer a place where we have to be alone. He says, so death no longer itself is hell. Because death no longer has to be a place of absolute solitude, because even though maybe our friends can't go with us through that door, Jesus goes with us through that door. Jesus who entered in the grave, Jesus who laid in the tomb for 3 days, and Jesus who broke the grave and rose up. And then he goes one step further and says, so now hell is not just, because I skipped over something. So he kind of played on how in the Old Testament and ancient world, hell and the underworld were interchangeable terms. Right? There really was not in the ancient mind a difference between the place where the dead go and a place of punishment. Right? So the death was just death, or the Sheol or hell or Hades was just kind of like that shadowy realm of the dead. He says now hell is not just where you go when you die and experience isolation, because we don't have to be alone in death. He says now hell is only the isolation that we choose for ourselves. And here we start to come into an understanding of what, for instance, C.S. Lewis says when he says that those who are in hell choose it. Right? Because if we are made for love, if we're made for communion, if we're given this gift of freedom so that we can be in communion and in a relationship, a dangerous side effect of freedom is that we can abuse our freedom. Right? God gives us this gift because without this gift we can't be in relationship with Him. But a dangerous side effect of that is that we can use that gift to say, no, Lord, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. To say to our brothers and sisters, no, I don't want to be in communion with you. I want to be selfish. I want to seek my own ends. I want to close, I want to take this gift that was given me so I can be open to others. And I want to be closed in on myself. And that's if we want to really get to an understanding of what sin is not just a violation of some arbitrary rules. Sin is a turning away from God and neighbor into selfishness. And there's a way we can become so deeply locked into that selfishness that love can no longer penetrate into our own hearts. And then we've isolated ourselves. And if we die in that final isolation, he says that's hell. Hell is that choice that we have made where over and over and over again we have rejected love, we've rejected communion, we've rejected relationship. And essentially God says, okay, your will be done. So you can start to see how this becomes a different understanding of hell and how that starts to stretch back into our life, right? Because hell is not about a punishment that has nothing to do with your actions. Right? If we understand hell as final solitude, that's actually just the outcome of a life spent choosing yourself instead of communion. Right? If you choose not to be in communion, then final solitude is what you've chosen. Now, conversely, it says just like hell is this place of final solitude where ultimately love can't even reach anymore. Because Jesus, fully God, fully man, right, unites his human nature to divinity. Not only does he rise from the dead, he ascends into heaven. He ascends into eternity. And he takes his humanity with him. And he takes us with him. He takes us with him even more because we are configured to him by our baptism. By our baptism, we become members of his body. Right? And we bear the sacramental character of being members of the body of Christ. And he ascends to the Father, which is that place not, we don't just think of heaven as some place like above the clouds or out in the outer reaches of space, but it's the otherness of eternity, of being in the presence of the Father. So somehow Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, the Son, united, with his humanity united to him, has gone back to eternity, has gone back to the bosom of his Father, where he dwells once again in that eternal love, but he's taken his humanity with him. And because he's conquered death, and because he's opened up the path to eternal life, there's the possibility for us to follow him through that open door into the eternity of the love of the Trinity. If we allow ourselves to be united in Christ, if we allow ourselves to be opened by him to the love of his Father and the love of each other, then that communion, that desire to be with the other, that love can become finalized in union with God. And once we die and we leave temporality ourselves, and enter into eternity. And that communion, that love can be final, and it can be final in such a way that death can't touch it. He says that's really important, right? When we think about the things that we hope for most in the world, one of them, many people spend so much of their lives searching for happiness the wrong way, right? All of us want to be happy. And everything that we do, St. Thomas Aquinas teaches us this, everything we do because we somehow calculate that it's going to lead us to happiness or has something to do with our happiness. Unfortunately, we're not always right about what's going to make us happy. And one of the things, if we pursue happiness in the wrong places, right? If we pursue happiness, for instance, in material wealth, or in pleasure, or in fame, or a good reputation, or whatnot, these are all finite goods, which means they can never really satisfy us, right? You can amass all of the treasure in the world. You can pursue all the pleasure in the world, and ultimately, it's not going to be enough. Right? Pleasure comes and goes, turns into a grain of sand, right? You haven't maybe experienced this yet because you're very young, but this is what people who seek material pleasure, or who seek material happiness find out, is you can be very successful and you just keep acquiring and acquiring and acquiring, and it's almost like happiness and the meaningfulness of your life, right, is always just outside of your grasp. You know, I think, well, if I can just get that one more promotion, then I'm going to be happy with my career, right? If I can have just a little bit bigger of a house, right? If I can get that membership at the country club, if I can get that equity membership at the country club, right? There's always just a little bit, the happiness just seems elusive, and what happens is when people really invest themselves in pursuing power, pleasure, money, wealth, whatever, or power, pleasure, well, what's the fourth one? Fame, thank you. With a little theologian here. When we really invest ourselves in seeking for happiness that way, not only does it not satisfy, but we start to become depressed and disillusioned with life. So, first of all, if we're going to really find happiness, if we're going to have a well-founded hope, our hope has to be invested in the sort of thing that is able to satisfy us. And our hope, if it's to be a final hope that's going to allow us to really live, it has to be something that is not even threatened by death. So what kind of thing could really satisfy us? Well, hopefully, you can already guess where this is going, right? We've talked about how we're made for love, we're made for communion. He says, the only thing that can really bring satisfaction and meaning to our lives is love. He says, think about the experience of, well, he just talks about encountering love. I'll use the language of falling in love. I don't know if you've fallen in love before. Don't raise your hand. We'll allow that to remain the privacy of your hearts. But if you've ever experienced authentically the love of another, it is a life-changing experience. And sometimes, no, not sometimes, all the time actually, when you know that there's somebody who really loves you, even if it's just one person, it can change your whole outlook on life. And your life suddenly has meaning, and you know you're not alone, and you feel like you can do anything. Right? Just that encounter, that encounter with one person who loves you can change the whole trajectory of your life. But every human relationship that we have, every human love that we encounter, every human love that we give, none of that can ultimately be the ground of our hope, because even that love is threatened by death. This is why the victory over death becomes so important for our hope. He says, but because, first of all, we encounter in Jesus the God who loves us, the God who loves even me, the God who reaches down from his eternity, comes down out of his heaven and becomes man just to save me and wants to be in relationship with me. That God has conquered death. That love, that relationship is no longer subject to death. Which means if the meaning of our lives is rooted in the love of Jesus Christ, not only do we have a hope that's really good enough to satisfy, we also have a hope that's not threatened by any earthly power. There's so much freedom in this. Right? Why do martyrs die for the faith? Is it because they don't care about life? No. Right? Our Christian faith teaches us to love our lives. We cherish life. Right? Christians are joyful people. We're not looking to die. We don't have a romance with death. And yet, how many people in the history of the church have been willing to lay down their lives because of their faith? Right? Or why is it that people are able to embrace the religious life and give up family and wealth and all and their freedom and all that? Is it because they don't care about family? They don't have any desire for those relationships? They don't have a desire for their freedom? No. We are able to give up all these things because we have found something that gives deeper meaning to our existence. The reason that we're able to sacrifice, the reason that we're able to be free to let go of worldly things and even sometimes let go of our lives is because we have encountered a love that is stronger than death and that becomes the ground and the meaning of our lives. And that certainty and that invincibility of love gives us the freedom to live, in a sense, almost recklessly. It gives us the freedom to throw everything away. Because if we're not certain of that love, or if we're not certain of the eternality of that love, how can we possibly afford to let go of whatever pleasure or satisfaction this life has to offer us? If we're not certain that something better awaits us, or that something better is inviting us into a relationship even now, how can I possibly afford to let go of all of my aspirations for worldly success and pleasure and happiness? Can't. What makes us free is the fact that our existence is rooted in that love, and that love is eternal, and that love is not threatened by death. So, let me look at my notes. Yeah. So on this basis, I think that we have a grounds, first of all, to reimagine heaven and hell, but also hopefully you'll forgive the expression, it's actually a very inappropriate expression, but to hang some kind of flesh on those vague notions we maybe have of heaven. And I do think it's necessary for us to think about hell because it's kind of the alternate reality, but what I really want us to think about is heaven. And maybe what I propose to you is this. Don't think of heaven as a place where you show up there and you breathe a sigh of relief and say, I made it, and then you get handed the keys to your mansion in the car. Rather, I want you to think about the moment in your life when you have most clearly and deeply experienced love. And I want you to imagine that love sort of blown up times infinity and in no way passing away. And knowing that it never will pass away. And there's no before or after. There's no danger or fear of losing this. There's just that moment of being embraced by love. And it is now, forever and ever and ever, and will never be taken away from you. And if you can start to imagine that, then you'll begun to glimpse what heaven really is, and what our Christian life is ultimately about. So, thank you. I will take questions now if you have them. Yes.
Okay, so the main premise and argument is that it's all about being open to connection, and that's what really differentiates between heaven and hell. So let's say we have a person who's open to connections with people and with each other, but for whatever reason they don't feel like the connection to God is of like the most important. So say like people who don't identify as any religion, but they're spiritual or they're open to the connections with a higher power, but don't necessarily identify Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior.
Sure.
Could they still be invited into that Trinity of heaven because they're open to connection and they haven't really been selfish in their life? They just never realized the importance of connecting with a specific higher power.
Right. Does anybody ever have mentions readily available? Because I'm going to answer your question in 2 hours. Okay, so you asked about... So first of all, I'm glad that you asked about connection and being open to connection, because sometimes I don't explain things as well as I like. So when I talk about how we're made for a relationship and the need to be opened up for a relationship, I mean that we're made for self-gift. That's really what, that's the heart of love and community. We're actually made to make a gift of ourselves to others, to give ourselves away. So the reason I want to clarify that is because connectivity can become open-ended. Right? It can be sort of a vague concept, right? I'm trying to be kind of connected with people around me. Now, the rest of your question, what you're really asking, I think, is a version of the question, can non-Christians be saved? And the answer is probably. It's certainly possible, right? But it has not been revealed to us that we can be saved other than through baptism, for instance. And what the church generally teaches is we have good reason to believe in God's mercy, but that ultimately, if anybody is saved, anybody at all, it's through Jesus Christ and through the grace of his crucifixion, his death and resurrection, and which is mediated to us by the church. So, is it possible that somebody who really lives for love is going to be invited into that Trinity, and maybe they don't realize what they're choosing? Yes, I think it's possible. We certainly can't say with certainty, so we have to leave it to the Lord's mercy. But I will also say that sometimes, I think almost all the time, the Lord invites us through gradual steps. So sometimes an authentic experience of human love can be a huge stepping stone towards the experience of the love that God has for us. And usually he begins to communicate with us that way. He starts with things that we can understand. They're much more tangible and available to us. So he may start with human love and then use human love to teach us about his love. And possibly the love that we have for another person can become a gateway, we hope, into relationship. Ratzinger would also say, by the way, that the only true communion we can have with one another has to be rooted in God. So whatever true communion exists between us is somehow because we're connected through God himself. So good question. Kevin, no?
What would you recommend reading in your Ratzinger's words and stuff?
Probably my favorite thing is, and it's part of my talk. It's an encyclical called "Saved in Hope," or its actual name is Spesali, S-P-E-S-A-L-E-I. But it's a good place to start because it's really good. It's written for sort of much broader consumption. It's written for the whole church, whereas Introduction to Christianity is kind of a scholarly work. But yeah, it's short enough that you can really digest it. I think it's just unbelievably beautiful. So I would, if you want to start reading Pope Benedict, I would start with the encyclical Saved in Hope. Yes?
You mentioned making a gift of yourself.
Yeah.
Could you say more about that and like a practical example of what it looks like, a person who is giving a gift of themselves, both to God and to other people?
So, the best example is probably to start with like the vocations. So, because every authentic vocation is about self-gift. So for instance, in marriage, you have two people that are binding themselves to each other. What they're really doing is they're making a gift of themselves to each other. Because marriage is really about service and mutual self-sacrifice, right? Our culture really gets it wrong, and it's part of the reason why there's so many bad marriages out there, because we go into marriage asking questions like, are my needs going to be met? Am I going to be satisfied, right? Whereas we should be going into marriage asking, am I going to be enough of a servant to this woman and this man that I'm binding myself to? So that vocation is about a gift of self, right? Every vocation is ultimately a participation in the cross, and the cross is the example par excellence of what real love looks like, a real gift of self. Jesus gives us everything. He holds nothing back. Right, on a wedding day, that's what a man and woman are called to do, is give everything to each other. Or similarly, somebody's called the priesthood, for instance. Part of the rite of ordination, we lay down on the floor. It's called lying prostrate. And it's an image of laying down our lives. Because we're saying, my life no longer belongs to me. And I'm not going to live for my own desires or my own ambitions. I'm going to lay down my life, first of all, for the Lord and in service to his church. So when you ask what does self-gift look like, now those are examples. It's easier to understand things when we blow them up large. So vocations is a very large way to understand what self-gift is. But I think if we can grasp that idea, then you start to understand how in much smaller ways and seemingly more insignificant ways, we can give of ourselves to others in our lives, right? Of course, love is the most abused word in the English language because, for instance, in Greek, there's like 5 different words for love, and we use one word in English. So we say, I love my dog, Athena. I do love my dog, Athena. I love pizza. I love The Office. I love my wife, and I love Jesus Christ. Like, there's no way you mean the same thing every time you say that word, or you have one word. So self-gift is the highest form of love, which is not affection. It's not erotic love. It's self-gift. It's putting the good of the other first. Yes.
You talked about purgatory and how it relates to what you talked about tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we say that, so Father Matt began tonight by talking about the last things. So probably a lot of you know the 4 last things, which is death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Purgatory seems conspicuous by its absence. And the reason is that purgatory is not an eternal reality. So the idea behind purgatory is that if we are to enter into God's heaven, so to speak, we must become perfected in love. Or a way that I'll teach my high school students about it is to say, when we sin and we repent of that sin and we go to confession, there are still effects of sin in us that have to be purified before we can, really be fully bound to the Lord. To use a kind of a crude example, if I'm feeling rotten and I throw rocks through my neighbor's window, but then I feel bad about it, and I go apologize to my neighbor, and let's say my neighbor's just kind of a gentle soul, and he says, I forgive you. So what I've done is I've been forgiven, and that relationship has been restored, but what do we still have? We still have the problem of the broken window, right? So let's say, for instance, I fall into sexual sin. Now, I can repent of that sin and go to confession, and definitely my sin is forgiven, but guess what? There are still now bent desires in my heart. And I can't really, if I'm honest with myself, I can't deny that those desires are there. And I can't say that my will is perfectly aligned to God when I kind of want to sin. So, not all of us are perfectly perfected by the end of our lives. That's what we said the saints have become perfected in love. Right? So when a saint dies, those kind of imperfections, or at least those major imperfections, have been sort of ironed out. But a lot of us, we might die in a state of sanctifying grace and right relationship with God, but maybe we still have some of that ugliness, that brokenness, that bending of our will, and we need a place for us to be purified. Otherwise, we can't be in God's presence, right? So we always say that purgatory is a doctrine of mercy, and that's kind of where it fits in here. So I've heard it said that purgatory is like hell but temporary, or hell with hope. Right? So it's a suffering, it's an experience of your sinfulness, and it's an experience of the absence of God. But you also know that you're being purified and that you're going to be there. Although to say that purgatory is like hell with hope actually contradicts everything that I just said about hell. So, I would sometimes wish there's like a 30-second delete button on life. Just take back the last 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay. All right, I think we're done. Thank you very much for having me.